An 18-story hotel comes crashing to the ground.
People are panicked. There's a lot of uncertainty.
You're close to someone possibly trapped in the building.
The structure comes tumbling down floor by floor like a house of cards.
What's behind the unexpected collapse?
This kind of thing should not be happening today.
Saturday morning, 9 a.m. The people of New Orleans are gearing up for a busy weekend. Among them, artist and producer Fallon O'Brien. She's getting ready for her regular commute.
So a normal day would be to get up and to have a cup of coffee. I live just around the corner from the streetcar, so it would, take me just a few moments to walk to the streetcar.
The streetcar heads toward the corner of Canal Street and North Rampart, where a brand new high-rise structure is being built. The Hard Rock Hotel, perfect for tourists flocking to the biggest event of the year, Mardi Gras.
It was going to provide so many jobs. It was going to provide a huge boom for the tourism.
The hotel should have been done by May 2019, but now it's months behind schedule, so the pressure's on to finish it. Today seems routine.
We got to the corner of Canal and North Rampart. I do remember looking up briefly. It all happened in a split second. In the peripheral of my vision, I just see kind of something falling down. So I look up, I see a tangle of metal.
18 floors come crashing down.
The building starts to crumble at the very top, and then we have this cascade of failure as the floors, the concrete pancakes from top to bottom.
Rescue services race to the scene.
The overwhelming majority of buildings are built without any kind of failure or issues, and this kind of thing should not be happening today.
The question, what caused it and how? The first clue lies in the smallest detail.
In very broad terms, if you want to put up a building, you start with the foundation, make the base of the building very stable, and then you'll build what is effectively the skeleton of the building, whether that's out of structural steelwork or reinforced concrete. And in the case of the Hard Rock, that was largely structural steelwork.
All this steelwork must be connected.
Major structural components of large buildings are often bolted together. It is a cheap but very effective way of taking large pieces of steel and making a solid connection between them.
Bolts are small components, but they're critical in holding the building's frame together.
If you take an individual bolt, it's seemingly quite small relative to the structure as a whole, but the job that it does is absolutely crucial to the life of this building.
As investigators sift through the wreckage of the Hard Rock Hotel collapse, they find something strange. Many of the bolts on the lower floors are sheared in two.
A shear failure is where you have forces acting in opposite directions on a piece of metal, say, and the combination of those forces exceeds the strength of the material. And as a result, you get a very sudden or catastrophic break or failure.
Footage reveals the Hard Rock collapse was indeed sudden.
Oh my God.
So why did the bolts fail?
It could be because there weren't enough bolts used at those junctures or connections, or it could be that those bolts just weren't big enough, that there wasn't enough material to have the strength needed. Or it could be a combination of both these things.
The question remains, are the shattered bolts the result of the collapse or the cause of it? In any building or machine, if a small but crucial component breaks, it can trigger a chain reaction. Dawn, New Orleans. As the sun rises over the city, the Hard Rock Hotel approaches breaking point. On the 18th floor, the crew adds a new piece of equipment, a scissor lift.
This is a very heavy piece of machinery.
It weighs 3,000 pounds, and it's placed on the recently poured concrete slabs.
My expectation as a structural engineer would be that anyone who has put that scissor lift there has thought very carefully about whether the floor slab is going to be able to support that load in an effective way.
Workers move the scissor lift to the western side of the 18th floor.
That scissor lift represented a point load on one of the upper floors in a position somewhere that may or may not be mechanically as strong as it should be.
On the floor directly below, some of the temporary supports have been removed, and the concrete isn't fully set.
It's big, it's heavy, and it could push this over the edge.
We got to the corner of Canal and North Rampart. I do remember looking up briefly. It all happened in a split second. I just recall looking back down at my phone and then hearing what sounded just like things beginning to fall. Large, heavy concrete and faint screams in the distance. We got out of that streetcar pretty quickly. You couldn't see 100 to 200 feet in front of you. Everything was just gray and very apocalyptic. And people were covering their mouth and screaming and ducking and just running as fast as they could away from the site.
On the 8-4, we got one person trapped. Yes, a lot.
That could go at any moment.
Rescue is slow and painstaking. Eventually, dozens of trapped victims are recovered, but 3 workers die.
That day was pretty horrifying on so many levels. It was really sad and tragic because you could hear they were crying and screaming and people just, you know, in tears, a mess, having been bear witness to that.
Modern buildings shouldn't pancake down the way the Hard Rock does. But it seems this structure is more house of cards than strong concrete and steel.
And anyone who's ever actually built a literal house of cards will know that if the cards at the top of the stack fall down, the rest of the cards are likely to follow.
The consequences of this failure are tragic. The site is so unstable, it takes emergency workers 10 months to retrieve one of the bodies.
There's still anger and hostility after everything that's gone on because the buildings stood for almost a year. So, you know, it acted as this tomb. It was this gloomy, gloomy stamp on our city.
Finally, 17 months after the collapse, demolition begins. Two building safety inspectors were suspended without pay for allegedly falsifying reports. But with investigations still ongoing, it's unclear who is ultimately at fault.
It's sort of torn the city apart to some degree. You know, there was a lot of pointing fingers and who was to blame.
What's certain is a number of mistakes contributed to this disaster. And since over 1,000 workers have died on U.S. construction sites in recent years, it's crucial to learn from them. As buildings soar higher, the risks increase.
In reality, nothing always goes right. Sometimes mistakes are made. It's the job of engineers, architects, and designers in construction projects to make sure that if mistakes are made, they don't catastrophically cause the entire project to fail. The upshot of all of this is we should learn from this. We should look back and examine what went wrong and make sure those mistakes aren't made again.
Oh my God.